A millionaire businessman visits a public school and sees an 8-year-old girl sitting alone in the cafeteria, staring at her pink lunchbox without opening it. Curious, he asks, "Why don't you open your lunchbox? Aren't you hungry?" When she finally does, the millionaire cries upon seeing what was inside. The air in the school cafeteria was thick, a mix of overcooked green beans and the tangy sweet smell of tomato sauce from the day's spaghetti. For Arthur Vance, a man whose world was defined by the scent of luxury car leather and the sterile silence of boardrooms, the environment was an assault on the senses. The noise, an inefficient cacophony of children's shouts and laughter, grated on ears accustomed to the calculated calm where decisions moving millions in capital were made. He was here for a pragmatic reason, to evaluate a potential philanthropic investment. The public school in the working-class neighborhood was an item on his agenda, a corporate image project disguised as altruism, a way to balance the liabilities of his ruthless reputation with the assets of a good deed. His mind, a finely honed instrument for identifying opportunities and risks, analyzed everything: the peeling paint on the walls, the scratched Formica tables, the chaotic joy of the children. It was all processed as data to calculate the return on investment for his public image. His gaze swept the hall with the detachment of a general surveying an unfamiliar battlefield. He didn't see children. He saw a system. He saw statistics. And then, amidst the vibrant disorder, his eyes locked on an anomaly, a glitch in the pattern. In a far corner, isolated from the flow of energy that coursed through the cafeteria, a little girl sat completely alone. She was small, with dark hair tied back in a loose ponytail, wearing a visibly worn school uniform, while the other children devoured their meals, traded secrets, and shoved each other in innocent play. She remained motionless, a point of silence in a sea of noise. Her posture was rigid, her shoulders hunched as if trying to make herself invisible. It was an image that, for some irritating reason, disrupted the logical order of Arthur's universe. What captivated him, however, was the object on the table in front of her, a pink lunchbox, decorated with a cartoon princess faded by time. The lunchbox was closed. The girl didn't touch it, didn't try to open it. Her eyes, large and dark, were fixed on it with an intensity that seemed a mixture of longing and resignation. A profound sadness emanated from her, an aura so palpable that Arthur, a man who built his fortune on the ability to ignore emotion, felt a strange, inexplicable discomfort. Why wasn't she eating? Logic dictated that a child at lunchtime should be hungry. It was a simple puzzle, yet his mind, capable of deciphering the most complex stock market movements and predicting market trends, couldn't find a solution. He tried to look away, to focus again on his task, on evaluating the school's structure, on thinking about the numbers, the profits and dividends his businesses relentlessly generated. But his gaze kept returning to the solitary figure in the corner. The image of the girl and her untouched lunchbox was like a grain of sand in a well-oiled machine, small, insignificant, but capable of bringing the entire apparatus to a halt. A curiosity he hadn't felt in years began to bubble beneath his indifferent facade. It was an unproductive emotion, a waste of precious time. Yet, against every instinct that had made him a multimillionaire, he felt his feet begin to move. He crossed the cafeteria, the sound of his expensive shoes muffled by the childish uproar. Each step was a break in his routine, a crack in his armor of emotional detachment. As he drew closer, the sadness on the girl's face became even sharper. She didn't notice him, completely absorbed in her own world of silence and waiting. He stopped beside the table, a towering shadow over the small figure. His voice, normally used to seal multi-million-dollar deals, came out softer than he'd intended. "Why don't you open your lunchbox? Aren't you hungry?" The girl started, lifting her head with a sharp movement, like a startled sparrow. Her eyes, a brown so dark they seemed to absorb the light in the room, widened. For an instant, pure childish fear shone in them, the fear of being noticed, of being in trouble. She looked at Arthur's expensive suit, at his shoes that cost more than her family probably made in a month, and shrank further into her chair. Her voice, when it finally came, was a nearly inaudible whisper, as fragile as a dry leaf. "I'm not hungry, sir." The lie was so transparent, so clumsily delivered, that it hit Arthur with more force than any elaborate truth. He, a master of negotiation, accustomed to deciphering the subtle lies of executives and business rivals, felt completely disarmed by a child's simple falsehood. The hunger was there in her eyes, in the way her gaze darted to the other children's trays before returning, disciplined, to the closed lunchbox. "Every child is hungry at lunchtime," he insisted, his voice sounding harsher than he meant. It was his way of operating, with logic, with facts, and the fact was, the girl should be eating. Her refusal was an unexpected variable, a system error his mind needed to correct. He felt an impulse to simply grab the lunchbox and open it, to solve the mystery and restore order, but something stopped him. Her vulnerability was a barrier stronger than any argument. Before he could formulate another question, a shadow fell between them. "Can I help you, Mr. Vance?" The voice was firm but weary. It was the school principal, a middle-aged woman named Helen Davis, whose face bore the lines of years spent fighting for resources and looking after hundreds of children. She placed a protective hand on the girl's shoulder, who seemed to relax minimally at the familiar touch. "I was just curious," Arthur said, feeling strangely defensive. "This young lady isn't eating her lunch." Principal Davis shot a quick, meaningful glance at the girl, a look that held a mixture of sadness and understanding. "Lena can be a little shy about eating around others," she replied, with a polished diplomacy that barely concealed the warning for him to back away. "We appreciate your concern and your interest in investing in our school, but the children are our priority." The message was clear. Your money is welcome, but your intrusion into the students' lives is not. Arthur felt a sting of irritation. He was not used to being dismissed, least of all by a public school administrator. His instincts told him to retreat, to return to his world of numbers and strategies, where emotions were liabilities to be avoided. He was supposed to be in a meeting, discussing the acquisition of a new company, growing his net worth. Instead, he was here, transfixed by a closed pink lunchbox. He took a step back, nodding formally to the principal. "Of course, I understand." But he didn't understand at all. As he walked away, his gaze met Lena's one last time. Her expression was no longer one of fear, but of a silent plea, a request for him not to expose her. The image burned into his mind. The bell shrieked, announcing the end of lunch. The children began to disperse, leaving a trail of crumbs and empty juice boxes. Lena rose slowly, picked up her lunchbox without ever having opened the clasp, and walked toward her classroom, her small body nearly vanishing down the hallway. Arthur watched her until she was out of sight, the pink lunchbox swinging by her side like a heavy secret. The principal had won the small battle, but Arthur Vance hadn't built his fortune by accepting defeat. A cold, unfamiliar determination took hold of him. This wasn't about philanthropy. It wasn't about business. It was something primal, a need to understand this anomaly that defied his worldview. He would be back. He had to know what was, or what wasn't, inside that lunchbox. Back in his sanctuary, atop the city's tallest skyscraper, Arthur Vance tried to immerse himself in the comforting familiarity of numbers. The screen before him displayed complex charts, the ebb and flow of his stocks, the steady growth of his net worth. They were his language, the metric by which he measured success and self-worth. He analyzed profit projections, budgets for new ventures, and performance reports on his vast investments. Yet, for the first time in his disciplined career, his mind refused to obey. The numbers blurred, the lines on the graphs morphing into the contours of a small, sad face. The image of the pink lunchbox, a cheap, faded piece of plastic, stubbornly superimposed itself over figures in the millions of dollars. It was illogical, inefficient, a distraction he couldn't afford but couldn't shake. He stood and walked to the panoramic window, which offered a godlike view of the city he had helped build. He saw the concrete, the steel, the ceaseless motion of a metropolis fueled by capital and ambition. Somewhere down there, in a school that barely registered on the map of his life, was that girl, Lena. The name echoed in his mind. What was so special about her? He dealt with problems 1,000 times more complex every day, but the simplicity of this mystery haunted him. It was a problem without a spreadsheet, an equation without clear variables. Driven by an impulse that was part frustration and part an obsessive need to solve the puzzle, he picked up the phone. "Carla," he said to his assistant, his voice as sharp as ever, "I want you to find out everything you can about a student named Lena Garcia, from Hopewell Elementary School, family, financial situation, everything, and be discreet." There was a pause on the other end of the line, a hesitation that betrayed the strangeness of the request. Right away, Mr. Vance. But waiting for a report felt like torture. The afternoon dragged on. A meeting about acquiring a cryptocurrency startup was a blur of technical jargon he barely registered. His mind was elsewhere, trapped in the silence of a noisy cafeteria. He glanced at the clock. The school day was almost over. In an act of complete anarchy against his own routine, he stood up in the middle of the presentation. "Cancel the rest of my agenda for today," he told a room of shocked executives before walking out without another word. In the private elevator, he loosened his tie, feeling suffocated by something other than his shirt collar. He didn't go home. He drove his luxury car, a cocoon of silence and power. Back to the modest streets of the school's neighborhood, he arrived just in time to see the gates open, releasing a wave of loud children. He waited, his heart pounding with an unfamiliar anxiety, and then he saw her. Lena emerged alone, the pink lunchbox swinging from her hand as before. He got out of the car and approached her with a caution that was unnatural to him. "Lena," she stopped, her eyes widening again, but this time with less fear and more curiosity. I came back," he said, feeling foolish. "I just wanted to make sure you were okay." She just nodded, clutching the handle of her lunchbox. The silence stretched between them, heavy and strange. He knew he had to break through. "Lena, please," he said, his voice softer than ever. "I won't get you into trouble, I promise. But I have to understand. What's in your lunchbox?" She looked at him, then down at the lunchbox in her hand. Her lips trembled, and for a moment he thought she would run. Instead, she walked slowly to a nearby park bench and sat down, placing the pink object on the concrete seat. Her small, hesitant fingers moved toward the clasp. Time seemed to slow. For Arthur, a man whose day was sliced into 15-minute increments where every second represented potential profit or loss, this moment stretched into an eternity. He watched the girl's fingers, thin and tentative, hover over the plastic latch. It was a negotiation more tense than any merger deal he had ever conducted. There was no money at stake, no stock prices rising or falling. There was only the fragile trust of a child and a secret held inside a pink box. Lena looked up at him one last time, a silent question in her eyes. She wasn't seeking permission, but perhaps a sign that he wouldn't judge her, that he wouldn't break her with the truth she was about to reveal. Arthur, unsure of what to do, just gave a slow nod, a gesture of encouragement that felt foreign and inadequate. He was an expert at assessing the value of assets, of property, of entire companies, but in that instant, He felt completely ignorant about the value of an 8-year-old girl's dignity. With a small click that sounded like an explosion in the quiet park, the latch came undone. The lid of the lunchbox lifted, not all at once, but slowly, like a stage curtain revealing a devastating scene. Arthur leaned in instinctively, his curiosity now laced with a terrible foreboding, and then he saw it. Nothing. The lunchbox was completely, utterly empty. There were no crumbs from a half-eaten sandwich, no crumpled wrapper from a cookie. The pink plastic interior was impeccably clean, as if it had never known food. The emptiness screamed at him, a silent echo of the hunger the girl had tried to hide. The sight hit him with the force of an unexpected market crash. All his wealth, his fortune built on cold logic and calculated decisions, suddenly seemed obscene, useless. His millions of dollars, his investments in gold and crypto, his entire financial empire couldn't fill this one small, empty space. Lena didn't cry. She just lowered her head, her chin trembling slightly, her shoulders slumping under the weight of her exposed shame. Her silence was a more powerful accusation than any scream. Arthur felt the air thin in his lungs. His mind, always agile, always ready with a solution, was blank. What was he supposed to say? "I'm sorry." The phrase felt hollow, an insult. Offer money. It would be crude, a way of turning her pain into a transaction, something he did so well. For the first time, he was faced with a problem that couldn't be solved with a check or a wire transfer. He stood there, a billionaire rendered powerless by a child's hunger. His eyes scanned the lunchbox again, as if hoping food would magically appear, and that's when he noticed something else. Tucked into a small elastic strap on the inside of the lid was a piece of notebook paper, carefully folded. It was almost invisible, a detail lost in the shock of the emptiness. "What's that?" he asked, his voice hoarse. Lena lifted her head, her eyes welling up. She looked surprised, as if she had forgotten the note was there. With a slow movement, she took it and, without unfolding it, held it out to Arthur. Their fingers brushed for a brief instant as he took the paper. It was thin and fragile. He unfolded it with an almost reverent care. The handwriting was a woman's, a bit shaky, but clear, and the first words he read struck him with the force of a revelation that would change everything. "My dearest daughter," the letter began. "My dearest daughter, forgive me." The simple, direct sentence carried the weight of a world of pain. Arthur read the trembling words on the piece of paper, and each letter seemed to etch itself onto his conscience. The penmanship was elegant, despite its unsteadiness, suggesting a hand accustomed to writing, now shaken by distress. "Today, Mommy couldn't get anything for your lunchbox. I know you'll be hungry, and my heart breaks into 1,000 pieces just imagining it, but please, don't let anyone see that it's empty. I don't want them to think badly of us. Just pretend you're not hungry, my love. I promise with all my strength that things will get better. Soon, I'll find a new job, and your lunchbox will always be full of yummy things, like before. Be strong for me. I love you more than anything. Love, Mom." The note ended there, with no further explanation, but its message was a gut punch to Arthur. He reread the last line, and like before, and a question formed in his mind. What had happened to turn before into a now of empty lunchboxes and broken hearts? He looked at Lena. The girl was watching him with anxious expectation, as if he, the powerful stranger, could somehow rewrite the words on that paper. He felt a wave of conflicting emotions, anger at the injustice of the situation, compassion, an almost forgotten sensation that left him vulnerable, and, above all, a crushing sense of responsibility. That note wasn't just an apology for a missed meal. It was a testament to a mother's silent struggle to preserve her daughter's dignity in the midst of despair. The empty lunchbox wasn't about a lack of food, it was about shame, fear, and desperate hope. Arthur carefully refolded the paper and handed it back to Lena, who tucked it back into its secret hiding place. The gesture felt intimate, as if he had been invited to partake in a sacred and painful ritual. "Your mother," he began, unsure how to finish the sentence. "She's very brave." Lena nodded, her lips pressed into a thin line, too proud to let the tears fall. "She's the best mum in the world," she whispered. The unwavering loyalty in the girl's voice was another knife in his heart. He, who viewed loyalty as an asset to be traded in business deals, was witnessing its purest, most unconditional form. He had to do something. Now, pragmatism, his safe harbor, finally returned. "Lena," he said, his voice now firm, the voice of a man who gives orders and expects them to be followed. "Listen to me. Tomorrow, at this same time, I will be here, and I will bring you the fullest, most delicious lunchbox you have ever seen, and one for your mother, too. That's a promise." Lena's eyes widened, a glimmer of hope. As bright and fragile as a distant star, appearing amidst the sadness. "Really?" she asked, doubt still battling the desire to believe. "Really?" he confirmed. "But you have to promise me one thing. Don't tell anyone about me yet. This will be our secret." She nodded vigorously, a small smile finally touching her lips. It was a shy smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, but it was enough. It was a victory, the first in a battle he had only just begun to understand. He walked her to the corner of her block, ensuring she got home safely, and then returned to his car. Sitting in the silence of the leather interior, the billionaire who commanded an empire felt completely shaken. The promise he'd made to Lena was easy to keep. Filling a lunchbox was trivial for a man of his wealth, but as he started the car, he knew it wasn't enough. This was a symptom, not the disease. He needed to understand the cause. He needed to know who this mother was and why she was struggling. He picked up his phone and called his assistant again. "Carla, about that investigation. I want the full report on my desk in 1 hour. And I mean everything. Where Lena's mother worked before, why she left, all of it. I don't care what you have to do, just get it." He hung up before she could reply, a cold urgency coursing through his veins. He was going to solve this. He was going to fix this family's life. He had no idea that the answer he was about to receive would not only shock him, but would shatter him in a way he never imagined possible. The next hour was the longest of Arthur's life. He ignored calls from his directors, emails marked urgent, and the fluctuations of the Asian stock market that would normally have his full attention. His universe had shrunk, reduced to waiting for a single digital file. When Carla's email finally arrived, with the subject line, "Confidential Report, Garcia Family," he felt his heart quicken. He opened the document with a slightly trembling hand, a sign of anxiety he hadn't experienced since the risky initial investment that had launched his vast fortune. The first page contained basic information. The mother's name, Sofia Garcia, 32 years old, widowed. Address in a working-class neighborhood. No criminal record. Clean credit until 3 months ago. Everything pointed to a simple, honest life. Then he reached the section on employment history. The information was right there, in cold black letters on the glowing screen. Sofia Garcia, former employee of Vance Corp Textiles. The company name leaped off the page, hitting him like an electric shock. Vance Corp, his company, the heart of his industrial empire. Arthur felt a chill run down his spine. The coincidence was unsettling, almost unbelievable. He read on, his breath caught in his throat. The report detailed Sofia's record with the company: 5 years of exemplary service, consistently high-performance reviews, regular promotions. She was a model employee, dedicated and hard-working. And then, the last line of that section, status, terminated. Date of termination, August 15th. Reason, operational cost reduction. August 15th. 3 months ago. The date struck him with the force of a punch. He didn't need to check his calendar to remember that period. It was when he, personally, had issued a directive to all department heads. The exact words echoed in his head, as clear as if he'd said them a minute ago. I want an aggressive 15% cost-cutting measure across all units. No exceptions. Efficiency is our priority. Profit doesn't wait for sentimentality. He remembered the meeting. He had been impatient. Annoyed by a marginal dip in quarterly dividends, he had demanded immediate action. One of his managers, a man named Bob, had hesitated, mentioning the human impact. Arthur had silenced him with a glacial stare. Numbers. Bob. Focus on the numbers. People are replaceable. Cash flow is not. Now, those words came back to haunt him. The human impact he had so arrogantly dismissed had a name, Sofia Garcia. It had a face, that of an 8-year-old girl with sad eyes. Lena's empty lunchbox was not an accident of fate, not a mere misfortune. It was a direct consequence, a straight line drawn from an order he had given in an air-conditioned boardroom, miles away from the reality of their lives. He was responsible. The realization fell on him like an avalanche, burying his self-image as a shrewd and efficient businessman, revealing something much uglier underneath, an architect of misery. He stood up, pacing his luxurious office. The glass that separated him from the city now seemed a fragile barrier against the reality he had ignored for so long. Every expensive piece of art, every designer piece of furniture seemed to mock him. All this wealth, this immense fortune, was built on decisions just like this one. How many other Sofias were there? How many other Lenas were sitting in cafeterias with empty lunchboxes because of his relentless pursuit of profit? The promise he had made to Lena to fill her lunchbox now seemed a cruel joke. He wasn't a savior. He was the cause of the problem. Fixing this would require far more than a sandwich and a piece of fruit. It would require him to confront himself, to look in the mirror and face the man he had become. The first obstacle wasn't Sofia's poverty or her pride. The first and most significant obstacle was himself, his own guilt, his own complicity, and he knew with a terrifying clarity that the next step of his journey would lead him straight to the door of the woman whose life he had shattered without even knowing her name. Night fell over the city, but Arthur didn't see it. For him, the darkness had already settled in his soul, a cold twilight brought on by the revelation in that report. The promise made to Lena now weighed on him, not as a gesture of kindness, but as the first payment on an unpayable debt. He couldn't just send a courier with a basket of food. He couldn't delegate this. He had to go himself, had to face the person behind the number he had cut from his payroll. With Sofia Garcia's address programmed into his GPS, he drove through streets that became progressively narrower and less lit, trading glass skyscrapers for brick apartment buildings and graffiti. Each block was a descent, not just geographic, but social and moral, that took him further from his sheltered world and closer to the raw truth of his actions. He found the building, a functional, unadorned concrete block with peeling paint and an air of weariness. He parked his luxury car, which looked like an arrogant alien on the modest street, and felt dozens of curious eyes from the windows. For the first time, he felt exposed, vulnerable, stripped of the power his name and fortune usually afforded him. He climbed 3 flights of stairs, the air thick with the smells of home cooking and cheap disinfectant. He stopped in front of door 3B, his heart hammering against his ribs like a prisoner trying to escape. What would he say? "Sorry, I ruined your life. Here's a sandwich." The absurdity of the situation almost made him turn back. But the image of Lena and her empty lunchbox pushed him forward. He took a deep breath and knocked. The door opened a few inches, revealing a woman with the same dark eyes as Lena, but marked by a profound exhaustion that aged her beyond her 32 years. It was Sofia. "Yes," she said, her voice cautious, her body positioned to block the entryway. "Mrs. Garcia," Arthur began, his voice sounding strange to his own ears. "My name is Arthur Vance. I met your daughter, Lena, and—" Sofia cut him off, recognition and suspicion warring on her face. "You're the man from the school. "What do you want?" The hostility was a wall of ice. I wanted to make sure you were both okay. I brought some things." He held up the bags from a gourmet market, feeling ridiculous. Sophia glanced at the bags and then back at him, a flash of wounded pride in her eyes. "We don't need charity." "It's not charity," Arthur said, his voice low and urgent. It's an apology. I own Vance Corp." The name hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. The color drained from Sophia's face. Understanding hit her, followed by a wave of pain so intense it was almost physical. She didn't scream, she didn't curse him. The reaction was far worse. It was absolute silence, a void that mirrored her daughter's lunchbox. And in that silence, Arthur's eyes were drawn to a small coffee table inside the apartment. On it, next to a stack of bills, was an official Vance Corp letter. "That letter," he whispered, pointing. Sophia followed his gaze, and a single tear finally escaped and traced a path down her cheek. "That letter," she said, her voice breaking, "is my promotion to supervisor. It arrived a week after you fired me. I was 2 weeks away. 2 weeks away from stability, from never having to worry about my daughter's lunchbox again." The revelation struck him like lightning, shattering the last defense he had. This wasn't just a cost-cutting measure, it was the theft of a future. He opened his mouth to speak, but no sound came out. Sophia stared at him, seeing not a billionaire, but a broken man. And then, with a devastating calm, she slowly closed the door in his face, leaving him alone in the dark hallway with the unbearable weight of what he had done. The soft click of the deadbolt was louder to Arthur than the opening bell of the stock exchange. He stood in the dimly lit hallway, the gourmet grocery bags hanging from his hands like useless offerings to an offended god. The closed door was more than a physical barrier. It was a verdict, a silent judgment that condemned him in a way no court ever could. Sophia's revelation about the promotion had hollowed him out. This was no longer an anonymous administrative error. It was personal. It was cruel. It was the kind of detail that turns a drama into a tragedy. The corporate efficiency he prized had revealed itself as a blind, stupid machine, crushing dreams just feet from the finish line. He, the master of market timing, the man who bought low and sold high, had timed his decision with devastating precision, destroying Sophia's hope at the very moment it was about to be realized. He turned from the door, feeling the full weight of failure. He walked down the stairs slowly, each step an echo of his moral descent. When he reached the street, the contrast between his pristine car and the worn-down neighborhood had never seemed so stark. It was a monument to his disconnection. He got behind the wheel but didn't start the engine. He just sat there, staring at the building where a mother and daughter were facing a night of uncertainty because of him. The anger at himself began to morph into something else, a steely resolve. Guilt wasn't enough. Guilt was a liability, an unproductive emotion. He had to turn it into an asset, into action. Giving Sophia her job back was the bare minimum, but he now understood that wouldn't be enough. The wound was deeper. This was about justice, about restoring not just her income, but her dignity and lost time. The next day, Arthur arrived at Vance Corp headquarters with an energy his executives hadn't seen in years. It wasn't his usual calculated coolness, but a feverish intensity. He called an emergency meeting of the board of directors. Standing before men and women whose sole focus was shareholder value, he told the story. He didn't use names, referring to a former employee and her daughter, but he described the empty lunchbox, the note, the lost promotion. He expected shock, maybe even a flicker of compassion. Instead, he was met with a frosty silence, followed by panic. "Arthur, you can't get personally involved in this," said one of the oldest members, a man named Marcus, whose career was built on protecting the company at all costs. "If it leaks that you, the CEO, are admitting to an error of this magnitude, we'll set a dangerous precedent." Think of the wrongful termination lawsuits. Other former employees will come after us. The damage to our stock would be catastrophic. Another director, younger and more aggressive, added, "Our fiduciary duty is to the shareholders, to the bottom line. The termination was legal, part of a necessary restructuring. Sentiment has no place in business." Their words were an echo of his former self, a chorus of ghosts he had created. They were simply reciting the gospel he had preached for 2 decades. The subplot he hadn't foreseen began to emerge. His own lieutenants, the men he'd trained to be ruthless, were now turning against his newfound conscience. They weren't protecting the company. They were protecting the system that guaranteed them exorbitant bonuses and lavish perks. To change policies, to admit human failure, threatened the status quo. It threatened their own pockets. Arthur looked at the faces around the table. He saw fear, greed, but no humanity. He realized his battle wasn't just to fix Sophia's life. It was a war for the future of his own company, for the soul of his empire. "This is not up for discussion," Arthur said, his voice as cold as steel. "We are going to make this right, and we are going to make sure it never happens again." As he left the room, leaving behind a board in a state of shock and conspiracy, he knew that Sophia's closed door had only been the beginning. He now faced an army of closed doors, right here in the heart of his own kingdom. And the most painful part was that he had given them all the keys. The board's resistance was just the first wave of a storm Arthur had underestimated. His executives, once loyal followers of his profit above all philosophy, now saw him as a liability. Small acts of sabotage began. Key reports on the termination program were delayed. Data on the human impact of the cuts, which he had urgently requested, arrived incomplete or sanitized. Bob, the manager he'd chastised for mentioning human impact, now avoided his gaze, clearly intimidated by the other directors. Arthur was isolated, a king in his own castle whose generals were plotting against him. They saw his change not as a moral evolution, but as a dangerous weakness, a flaw that could compromise cash flow and, consequently, their own bonuses. The irony was overwhelming. He had created monsters of efficiency, and now they refused to allow their creator to grow a heart. While he fought this internal war, he tried, with dogged persistence, to break through the barrier Sophia had erected. He sent a courier with a formal offer of reinstatement, including the supervisor position, back pay for all lost wages, and a significant bonus as an apology. The response came in the form of the returned, unopened envelope. He tried calling, but his calls went unanswered. Her refusal was a puzzle to him. He was offering the logical solution, the complete financial repair. Why wouldn't she accept? He, who had always believed every problem had a price, was facing one that money seemed unable to solve. The issue wasn't about income, it was about dignity. Sophia didn't want to be a charity case, an exception made by a billionaire's guilty conscience. Accepting his help on those terms would be admitting she was a helpless victim. And her pride, the only thing she had left intact, wouldn't allow it. The impasse was agonizing. Arthur felt powerless, a sensation entirely foreign to him. He had the power to move markets, to buy and sell companies, to influence the global economy. But he couldn't convince one woman to accept the help she desperately needed. It was then he realized his fundamental error. He was trying to fix this like a businessman, with proposals and figures, when what was needed was a human approach. He needed a bridge, someone who could speak Sophia's language, a language he had long forgotten. His thoughts turned to Helen Davis, the school principal. She had shown an immediate, protective understanding of Lena's situation. Perhaps she could help. He arranged a meeting with the principal, not in his imposing office, but in her small, cluttered room at the school. The smell of chalk dust and old books replaced that of leather and gourmet coffee. "Mrs. Davis," Arthur began, dispensing with all formalities. "I've made a terrible mistake, a mistake that has affected one of your students and her mother, Sofia Garcia." He told her the whole story, not omitting his own culpability, his callous directive, the cruelty of the lost promotion. Helen listened in silence, her face impassive, but her eyes revealing a deep, unsurprised sadness. Stories like this she saw every day, in different forms and scales. "I understand your desire to help, Mr. Vance," she said when he had finished, "but you can't just throw money at the problem and expect it to disappear. You broke her trust. You wounded her pride. You don't fix that with a check." "Then what do I do?" Arthur asked, the frustration plain in his voice. "I want to fix this. I truly do." Helen studied him for a long moment, gauging his sincerity. "The first thing you need to understand," she said, "is that simply giving her job back doesn't solve the trauma. 3 months without an income creates debt, interest, sleepless nights. The financial hole is real, but the emotional hole is much deeper, and you can't fix one without understanding the other." She leaned forward, her voice soft but firm. "And there's something else. Mr. Vance, Sofia isn't the only one. Your bail-aggressive cost-cutting decision didn't just affect one family, it affected dozens. I have other children in this school whose parents worked at your factory, children who are going through the same thing as Lena, maybe even worse." The revelation hit him with the force of a new, even larger avalanche. The problem wasn't a single empty lunchbox. It was an entire cafeteria of silent hunger, all of his own making. The principal's word, dozens, echoed in Arthur's mind with the persistence of a fire alarm. This was no longer one family's story. It was a miniature humanitarian crisis he had orchestrated. Every number on his cost reduction spreadsheet suddenly had a face, a home, a potentially empty lunchbox. The weight of this collective responsibility was crushing, a debt far greater than his vast net worth could cover. His fortune, built on the premise of efficiency, now seemed a monument to his own blindness. Sitting in his car outside the school, he felt poorer than he ever had. What was all this money in the face of the silent hunger of children? He understood that his initial plan to focus only on Sofia was inadequate, almost selfish. It was like trying to fix a single broken window in a collapsing building. But he also knew, instinctively, that he couldn't fix the whole building without first learning how to fix that single window. His journey of redemption had to start with Lena. He had made her a promise, and in his crumbling world of values, a promise to a child was the only pillar that still felt solid. He waited. The anxiety was a knot in his stomach. The school bell rang, and the wave of childish energy flooded the street. He scanned the crowd, his heart pounding. Finally, he saw her. Lena was walking slowly, staring at the ground, the empty pink lunchbox swinging from her hand. There was no expectation on her face, just the same tired resignation he'd seen on the first day. He got out of the car, holding a brand new, bright blue lunchbox, filled to the brim with everything a child could want. He approached her gently, kneeling to get on her level, a gesture of submission that would have been unthinkable a week ago. "Lena," he said softly, "I brought it, like I promised." He held out the blue lunchbox. For a moment, a flash of childlike joy lit up her eyes. Her fingers instinctively reached for the gift, but then she stopped. Her face closed off, the light extinguished, replaced by a shadow of pain and distrust that was far too old for her 8 years. She took a step back, her hand balling into a fist at her side. "I don't want it," she said, her voice low but firm. Arthur was bewildered. "But it's for you. It's full of good things." "I know," she answered. Her eyes filling with tears, she refused to let fall. "My mum told me who you are." The sentence hit him like a physical blow. He hadn't expected this. He had assumed their secret was still safe, that his identity was a problem between the adults. He opened his mouth to try to explain, to say he was going to fix everything, that he was sorry. but the words died before they were born. Lena stared at him, and in her eyes he saw the reflection of all the tears Sophia must have cried. And then, with the brutal honesty only a child possesses, she delivered the words that shattered what was left of his world. "You're the man who makes my mommy cry every night." The accusation wasn't angry. It was a simple statement of fact, and for that reason, it cut deeper than any professional critique or rival's attack. It was the truth, distilled into its purest, most painful form. The blue lunchbox slipped from his paralyzed hand, thudding onto the ground. The lid popped open, and a sandwich, an apple, and colorful cookies scattered across the dirty sidewalk. Lena looked at the spilled food, then back at him, and with a choked sob, she turned and ran, disappearing around the corner, leaving him kneeling on the ground, a broken man surrounded by the ruins of a promise he couldn't keep. The image of the food scattered on the sidewalk burned itself into Arthur's mind. Every colorful cookie, every piece of bread was a symbol of his failure. He had tried to use his wealth, his power to provide, as a shortcut to forgiveness. And Lena's rejection proved just how naive he had been. Her words, "You're the man who makes my mommy cry every night," echoed in his head, a mantra of his guilt. He remained there, kneeling on the sidewalk, oblivious to the curious glances of passers-by, until the street was empty. Slowly, he gathered the food, placing each item back into the blue lunchbox, as if he were picking up the shards of his own soul. He knew, with devastating clarity, that there could be no peace for him until he had repaired the damage he had caused. But how do you repair a pain so deep? How do you rebuild a trust you have single-handedly demolished? Back in his office, he ignored the growing rebellion of his board. The veiled threats, the political maneuvering to undermine his authority seemed petty now. The real battle wasn't in the boardroom, it was in the heart of an 8-year-old girl. He needed a new strategy, one that involved not money or power, but humility and humanity. He spent the night awake, not analyzing stock markets, but the market of human emotion, a field in which he was a complete novice. He realized that before he could help dozens of families, he had to prove to one family that his change was genuine. He had to earn forgiveness, not buy it. And the path to that forgiveness lay through an act of complete and total vulnerability. The next day, he didn't send a courier or make a call. He returned to Sophia's building, but this time he brought no food, no job offers. He brought only himself. He knocked on door 3B and waited. It took a long time, but finally the door opened and Sophia stood there, her face pale and exhausted, her eyes red from a night of crying. "What do you want now?" she said, her voice too tired for hostility, only an infinite weariness. "I didn't come to offer anything," Arthur said, his voice low and steady. "I came to ask, I want you to tell me your story. Not the HR report version, your version. I want you to tell me about the nights you cried. I want to understand what I did." Sophia stared at him. Surprised, the sincerity in his eyes, the absence of arrogance, disarmed her. She hesitated, then pulled the door open wider. "Come in," she said, her voice a whisper. For hours, Arthur sat on the worn sofa in the small apartment and listened. He listened to Sophia's dreams for Lena, to the pride she took in her work, to the hope the promotion had represented. She spoke of the shock of the layoff, the humiliation of borrowing money, the constant fear of not having enough to put on the table. She spoke of the nights Lena would pretend to be asleep, but she knew her daughter could hear her muffled sobs into the pillow. Arthur didn't interrupt. He didn't offer solutions. He just listened, absorbing every word, letting her pain seep through his armor and hit him squarely. For the first time, he wasn't analyzing a problem to be solved. He was bearing witness to another human being's suffering. When Sophia finished, the afternoon sun was slanting through the window, illuminating dust motes in the air. A deep silence filled the room, no longer one of tension, but of understanding. "I'm so sorry," Arthur said, and the words, for the first time, didn't feel hollow. "I know that doesn't fix anything, but I am so sorry. I was blind." He then spoke of himself, not the billionaire, but the man. He spoke of his loneliness, of how numbers and profit had become his only refuge, of how he had forgotten what it meant to be human. It wasn't an excuse, but a confession. At that moment, the bedroom door opened and Lena appeared, hesitant. She had heard everything. She looked at her mother, then at Arthur. He didn't smile at her or try to approach. He just met her gaze, his own eyes full of honest regret. Lena walked slowly to her mother and curled up in her lap, never taking her eyes off him. She said nothing, but the fear and accusation in her gaze had been replaced by something new, a cautious curiosity. Arthur knew he hadn't earned forgiveness, but maybe, just maybe, he had earned the right to start trying. That day in Sophia's apartment marked the beginning of a slow, painful transformation for Arthur. He understood that reparation couldn't be a single event, but a process. The first step was to solve the immediate situation, not as a CEO imposing a solution, but as a human being offering help. He no longer spoke of reinstatement. Instead, with Principal Helen Davis acting as an intermediary, he proposed something different. He explained to the board, in no uncertain terms, that the company had a moral debt. He wasn't asking for permission. He was informing them of a decision. Vance Corp would establish an emergency transition fund, a substantial initial capital to fully compensate all families affected by the recent cuts. It wouldn't be charity. It would be legal and ethical reparations covering lost wages, interest on incurred debt, and emotional distress. The proposal was met with fury. Marcus, the senior director, accused him of jeopardizing the company's financial future for an emotional whim. The threat of a vote to remove him as CEO became explicit. The battle for control of his empire had reached its climax. As the corporate war raged, Arthur focused on his personal battle. He began visiting Lena and Sophia's neighborhood, no longer as an intruder in a luxury car, but on foot. He talked to people, listened to their stories. He saw the community his decisions had impacted. He saw the small shops struggling because their customers no longer had money to spend. He saw the stress on the faces of parents at the school gate. The reality he once viewed as a blur from his skyscraper now had texture, sound, and smell. He discovered that Sophia was a natural community leader, helping neighbors even when she barely had enough for herself. He saw in her the supervisor Vance Corp had lost, a woman with both empathy and strength. He knew he needed her not just back at the company, but as a partner in rebuilding. The breaking point came on a Friday. The board called an extraordinary meeting to vote on his removal. His executives, led by Marcus, had prepared a solid case against him, citing erratic behavior and fiscally irresponsible decisions. At the same time, he had scheduled a final meeting with Sophia in the park near the school. The future of his empire and the possibility of his personal redemption would be decided on the same day. He went to meet Sophia first. "I understand if you never want to set foot on my property again," he said, "but I'm not offering you your job back. I'm asking for your help. I want you to lead the transition fund. You know these families. You know their needs. No one could do this better than you. And after that, I want you to come back as a supervisor, with the power to rewrite the policies so this never happens again." Sophia looked at him, and for the first time, he saw not just forgiveness, but respect in her eyes. "I accept," she said. "On one condition." "Anything," he replied. "You come to our house for dinner tonight with Lena. She needs to see the man you're becoming, not just the man you were." The invitation was more valuable than any contract. It was the acceptance he had been desperate for. With a lighter heart, he left for the battle of his life. He walked into the boardroom, where the faces were masks of hostility. Marcus began the presentation, detailing the risks, the projected stock drop, the danger of lawsuits. Arthur let him speak. When it was his turn, he didn't present charts or profit projections. He placed a single, faded pink lunchbox in the center of the polished mahogany table. "This," he said, his voice resonating with a moral authority they had never heard, "is our most important asset and our greatest liability. It represents the trust we've broken and the humanity we've lost. We can continue to measure our success in dollars and euros, or we can start measuring it in how many of these lunchboxes we can fill. The choice of how this company will be remembered is not mine, it's ours." A heavy silence fell over the room. The vote was about to begin, and the fate of Arthur Vance and Vance Corp hung in the balance. The silence in the boardroom was so thick it seemed to have physical weight. The pink lunchbox on the mahogany table was a silent accusation, a strange and humble object in a setting of power and wealth. The board members looked from the lunchbox to Arthur, their faces a mixture of disbelief, anger, and, in a select few, a flicker of reflection. Marcus, sensing the moment was his, stood to deliver the final blow. "This is theater, Arthur, cheap sentimentality that has no place here. We're talking about business, about profitability, about the wealth of thousands of investors. I call for the vote to remove the CEO for cause." The tension was palpable. Arthur's career, the empire he had built, it all came down to this moment. But before the vote could begin, an unexpected voice cut through the air. "I'd like to say something." It was Bob, the manager Arthur had humiliated months before. He was pale, but his eyes shone with a newfound resolve. "I was in the meeting when Mr. Vance ordered the cuts," Bob said, his voice trembling but firm. "I hesitated. I mentioned the human impact, and he told me to focus on the numbers. He was wrong, and I was wrong for not pushing back, for being afraid of losing my job." He looked directly at Marcus. "We all forgot that the numbers on our spreadsheets represent people. People like Sofia Garcia, who, by the way, was the most promising employee on my team and the one I personally recommended for that promotion. The revelation that one of their own was directly involved and supported Arthur's change stunned the board. "Arthur is offering us a chance," Bob continued, "to build something more than just a profitable company, a company we can be proud of. I vote confidence in the CEO." Bob's courage was the catalyst. Another director, a younger woman who had always been uneasy with the company's ruthless culture, declared her support. One by one, the votes began to turn. Marcus, seeing his rebellion crumble, sat down defeated. The final vote was overwhelmingly in Arthur's favor. The war was over. He hadn't just saved his job, he had won the right to transform his company's soul. That evening, Arthur went to Sophia's apartment. He wore no suit, just simple clothes. He brought a single dessert, not from a high-end market, but from a local bakery. The door opened, and Sophia greeted him with a genuine smile. The apartment was filled with the smell of home cooking. Lena was at the small living room table, drawing. She looked up at him, her eyes wide and curious, but the hostility was gone. The dinner was simple: rice, beans, and stewed chicken. To Arthur, it was the most meaningful feast of his life. They didn't talk about Vance Corp or money. They talked about school, about cartoons, about Lena's dreams of becoming a veterinarian. For the first time, Arthur felt a part of something real, a human connection that none of his billions in assets could buy. After dinner, while Sophia did the dishes, Lena approached him shyly, holding a drawing. It was a picture of 3 stick figures holding hands, a woman, a tall man, and a little girl. Above their heads, she had drawn a big, smiling yellow sun. "This is for you," she whispered, holding out the paper. Arthur took the drawing, his throat tight. "Thank you, Lena," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "It's the most valuable gift I've ever received." He looked at the little girl, and she gave him a small, shy smile. It wasn't total forgiveness, not a storybook ending, but it was a beginning. It was the first, most important victory. It was proof that the bridge he was trying to build, brick by brick with humility and regret, had finally reached the other shore. As he left the apartment that night, Lena's drawing in his hand, Arthur Vance knew the resolution to his conflicts was underway. He had won the battle at his company and, more importantly, had taken the first step toward healing the wound he himself had opened. 6 weeks had passed since that fateful first meeting in the school cafeteria. For Arthur, it was the most transformative period of his life, a journey that took him from the sterile heights of his financial empire to the depths of his own humanity. Vance Corp was no longer the same company. Under his new direction, and with Sofia Garcia as an essential consultant, the corporate culture began to shift. The Emergency Transition Fund was implemented with a speed and efficiency that shocked the skeptics. Dozens of families received not only financial compensation, but also offers of job retraining and placement support. The new company policy, dubbed the Full Lunchbox Principle, mandated a detailed human impact analysis before any mass layoff decisions, ensuring that efficiency would never again be synonymous with cruelty. The change was difficult. It met resistance. But Arthur's leadership, now tempered with empathy, prevailed. The company didn't just survive, it began to thrive in a new way, attracting talent that sought more than just a paycheck. Arthur's ultimate victory, however, did not take place in a boardroom. It happened in the same loud cafeteria where it all began. Hopewell Elementary became the pilot project for a new foundation created by Vance Corp. The Lunch for All program guaranteed a hot, nutritious lunch for every single child, every day, no questions asked, no distinctions made, erasing the shame of hunger. The cafeteria that had once witnessed Lena's solitude now echoed with the egalitarian joy of children sharing a meal. The empty lunchbox that had broken a millionaire's heart became the symbol of systemic change, proof that a single confrontation with reality could awaken a sleeping conscience and catalyze a profound transformation. On that day, 6 weeks later, Arthur was in the cafeteria, not as a detached inspector, but as a volunteer, scooping mashed potatoes onto colorful trays. He saw Lena sitting in the middle of a group of friends, laughing loudly, her face lit with a happiness he'd never seen. She no longer carried the pink lunchbox. She didn't need to. Beside her, her mother, Sophia, now the proud supervisor at Vance Corp Textiles and director of the Transition Fund, chatted with Principal Davis, planning the program's expansion to other schools. Sophia met Arthur's gaze from across the room and gave him a smile that held gratitude, respect, and an unlikely friendship. She had learned that dignity and forgiveness could, in fact, coexist. When lunch was over, Lena ran up to Arthur. "Look," she said, showing him a gold star sticker on her homework. "I got an A." "That's fantastic, Lena," he said, crouching down to her level. "I knew you were brilliant." She hugged him suddenly, a quick, tight hug that was worth more to him than all the gold in his vaults. "Thank you for making my mommy smile again," she whispered in his ear before running back to her friends. Arthur stood there, his heart overflowing. He, the man who measured life in profit and efficiency, finally understood the true measure of wealth. It wasn't found in spreadsheets or stock tickers, but in the laughter of a child, in the restored dignity of a mother, in the certainty that no child in this city would ever again have to hide their hunger in shame. The school cafeteria, once echoing with silent inequality, had become the stage for his redemption, proving that from the unlikeliest of encounters, the most profound transformation can be born, and that sometimes it takes a broken heart to finally learn how to feel.